Before I start, I would like to state that this takes place at my girlfriend's mom's house, which is right next to my house. Her cousin also lives in the same house with her. It was 11 p.m., and I get a text from my girlfriend's cousin that he thinks he heard someone banging on the door, and if I can come over to check. With my girlfriend out of town, I go to check it out because she's obviously scared. I show up, and there was nobody there, so I head back home. I get another text from her asking if my girlfriend's mom's room door has always been open. By this point, I'm freaking out and rush back over there with a knife because someone could be in the house. I get there and we both go into the mom's room to check it out. The mother is out of town as well. We notice some spots of what's believed to be water all around the floor and a red cup standing up on the floor, including a plugged-in light that wasn't supposed to be plugged in. We think nothing of it and notice that the bathroom lights are on. We open the door only to find nobody in there. I call my girlfriend and ask what's happening. She tells me that it's actually her sleep paralysis spirit causing all of it. Now, her paralysis spirit is very territorial and has chosen a corner of her room as her own, which I had a bunch of my clothes sitting in that corner. So we rushed to clear out the corner and turn all the lights off to leave the house untouched. To note, I've had extremely bad chills since we left the bathroom and felt like someone was constantly behind me. The red cup was to indicate the spirit's frustration of her territory being messed with. Normally, she would leave a red piece of clothing, but this time a cup. I apologize if I disappointed anyone with my story, but that's all. A close friend of mine passed away in 2019. He went out to the bar to drink with his roommate. His roommate left early and left him alone. Turns out, he had left his keys at his apartment, so he decided to climb a pole that was close to his window on the second floor. I'm sure you can guess what happened next. Well, since then, I have had two dreams about him. The first one was that we were in a house having a party. He was incredibly social and was always the life of the party. So in my dream, as soon as he walked through the door with food in his hand, everyone erupted into a cheer, but me. I just stared in disbelief and I just thought to myself, this feels wrong. This doesn't feel real. And then I woke up. My second dream was a bit more sad, I would say. I was in a rural Mexican neighborhood that felt familiar. You know, with a lot of fences around a house, clay rooftop tiles and whatnot. I was with my brother, friend's roommate. The three of them were best friends since middle school. And we went inside of an SUV. And then to my surprise, my friend came inside from the door opposite of me. But he didn't say a word to me. In fact, he came in and started talking to my brother and roommates and laughing, but not once did he look at me. At this point, it's been a few months since the funeral, and I had noticed he looked more sickly compared to the first dream I had of him. Well, we arrived to our destination, and it felt familiar, yet not really. Well, my friend's roommate moves in front of what looks like a memorial altar and declares, "Today we are here to celebrate the living." And I look back to my friend, again with his sickly appearance, and I tell him, "Michael, you're not supposed to be here. You're dead." And then he starts crying. And then I'm awake. As soon as I realized what I dreamt, I just started crying. He was more of an older brother to me than my own brother. He always wanted me to be a part of their parties, and even wanted me to date his sister, lol. It was such a hard loss for me, and I had never lost anyone before that. I just want to start by saying I'm not the type to convince myself that every little thing is a paranormal encounter. That said, I have definitely had other paranormal encounters in my life that I 100% believe were real, as there was activity in both my great aunt's apartment and my best friend's house growing up. I just have doubts based on the circumstances of this particular one, whether it was real or a product of a lack of sleep or a nightmare. I was visiting New York City at the time on a work trip and staying in a nice hotel in Midtown. Out of the 4 nights I stayed in the hotel, 3 of them I came home particularly drunk. I work in advertising and deals are won far more often at the bar than in the conference room. Not to mention, it's just the culture of an ad agency to work hard, play hard. Those nights I returned to the hotel drunk were uneventful. On the 4th night, I declined to drink much, only having a glass or 2 of wine as I had a 6 a.m. cross-country flight at JFK to catch. Coming back to the hotel from the bar around midnight was also uneventful. I responded to a few work emails, set my alarm and went to bed to get the few hours of sleep I could before needing to wake up and head to the airport. This is where things get weird. I usually don't dream, or rather, I usually don't remember them if I do. I do from time to time get crazy alcohol dreams if I get wasted, but they have always been a continuation of a great time I had the night before, and not at all scary. I was barely tipsy leaving the bar and completely sober when I got in bed. However, this night I did dream. From what I recall, I was in a huge circular room with towering bookcases as walls and antique furniture decorating the room. Nothing scary or alarming about the room itself. In fact, it looked quite regal, like I was in some European castle from the Renaissance era. I was standing in the middle of the room. I turned around, and on the other side of the room was a plump older lady, probably in her mid-60s, with grey hair sitting next to a small boy around 7 or 8 on a chaise lounge. The boy looked like some sort of page boy, and I don't remember too clearly what the older lady was wearing, but she looked to be a guardian of some sort. They were both staring at me, not maliciously, or with any kind of recognizable emotion, and I didn't feel any sort of threat from them being there. They were just staring. Almost immediately after I noticed them, I heard a ring of the telephone, an old rotary phone placed on an end table next to them. It rang a few times, but they made no move to answer it. Frustrated, I walked briskly across the room to answer it. However, right before I could approach them, the lady picked up the phone. She didn't make an attempt to find out who it was. She neither spoke nor placed the phone against her ear. She merely stuck out her arm, lifted the phone off the hook, and then after about 5 or so seconds, placed the phone down again. I was a bit put off, but returned for some reason to the middle of the room. It was like the scene reset. I was again looking at the older lady and the boy when the phone rang once again. This time, I actually felt something compelled me to want to answer it, more than just out of the routine of answering a ringing phone. However, the same thing occurred. The older lady would let it ring until I got close, then she'd pick it up, suspend it a few inches from the hook, and place it back down after a few seconds. Then once again, I returned to the middle of the room. Then again, the phone rang, and like clockwork, before I could reach the phone, the lady picked it up. By the 3rd time, I was really annoyed. I couldn't understand why she wouldn't let me answer it, or at least find out who it was. This time around, when it rang, I nearly sprinted to the phone and got closer than the previous times. However, the lady, being right next to it, could still beat me every time, and did. Out of frustration, I cried out to her, "I need to answer the phone. Why don't you let me answer it?" Even though I was in a place I had never been before and had no idea who was calling, I knew instinctively that the phone call was for me, and I felt I had to answer. The lady remained stoic, as well as the little boy. That was when, instead of going back to the middle of the room, I went to confront her more, and I woke up. When I awoke, the room was dark and my 3:40 alarm was going off. I was pre-packed and planned to leave the hotel by 4 a.m. At this point, I wrote it off as a rare, strange dream and the fact I only got about 3 hours of sleep. I must have been so tired instead of waking up, my mind dreamed that situation. That was about to be my conclusion. However, when I sat up to reach for my phone to turn off the alarm, I noticed a figure beside my bed. It was a male, 20s or 30s, Middle Eastern looking guy who was looking down on me. It was almost like looking at a hologram, like a 3D image. He simply shook his head at me in a disappointed look, turned around and walked directly through the wall opposite of my bed. By that time, I was fully alert and awake and started freaking out. I sat still in my bed for a good few minutes, trying to process, but I realized I didn't have time to sit around and think about what just happened, or I was going to miss my flight. As a note, the sound of the phone ringing in my dream and the sound of my alarm were two different sounds. I have definitely been tired enough in the past to dream about my alarm, but it's always the sound of my alarm, not a completely different noise. Additionally, the old woman, the boy, and the man I have never seen before. Once I was on my way to the airport and could start processing, I wondered if it was a ghost, if it was trying to communicate with me through my dreams. Could the woman and the boy be guides trying to stop this communication? Or was it my own subconscious defenses trying to protect me from contact? The spirit, or whatever it was, didn't seem angry and I didn't feel threatened. I only sensed sadness and disappointment. It was most definitely human emotions I saw on its face. I think the fact they turned around and left through the wall scared me more than seeing their actual presence at the time. If it wasn't for the fact they were 3D, I would have thought it was an actual person in the room, as all features were distinguishable. I never dreamed about the room, the phone, the lady or boy again, and I never saw the man either. I moved to New York City a year later and just moved back home this year after 5 years, and never had another experience like this again. I hope if what I experienced actually was communication from a lost soul, that they can find what they are looking for, to be at peace. Background. Located in New Orleans, lived close to a shut-down children's hospital. First experience after being here for 5 years. We live in a townhome and my bedroom is on the top floor. Ida just happened. We evacuated and didn't return until last week as we didn't have power. Damage has been taken care of. Things are back, in my life, to semi-normal. This Wednesday, I'm brushing my teeth in our ensuite bathroom. Hearing rasping and knock on door, I say come in, thinking it's the mister, and nothing. I opened the door and there's no one there. I open bedroom door, hear the mister walk into our townhome, get a bit spooked but brush it off. 20 minutes ago, I'm in the living room, on my phone, TV on, mister outside, it's just us. I hear the 2 empty beer bottles that the mister had placed there clink in the kitchen. I noped and went outside with the mister. Walked in, bottles are spaced like 6 inches on countertops. In order for them to clink, they need to be grabbed. So, I recently moved in with my boyfriend and everything had been fine. But sometimes when I'm home alone, there's always a clatter in the kitchen of our laundry room door closing, and it's gotten me a couple times to where I got a BB gun thinking it was someone in my house. Finally, the laundry room door closed and the dishes in the sink crashed while my boyfriend was home, and he was a bit nervous but told me not to worry as it seemed peaceful. The most active thing it's done so far was take the keys. My boyfriend and I were searching for our keys for an hour and had fully cleared off the dining table. And remember, this is a 1-bedroom, so there's not many places to search. We finally gave up, and not a moment after they appeared directly in the center of the dining table. It's been calmer since, but it's definitely weird. I don't know, am I just crazy because it's a new living area for me? So I'm 28, and this has been happening most of my life as I've lived in a few very old homes when I was growing up. As I'm sure you all know, you get used to how your home, apartments, etc. smell. Well, quite frequently to this day, I'll start smelling something random. Tends to happen mostly at night, but has happened during the day a few times. It could literally be anything from food cooking to fragrances like perfume, or more specifically right now, coffee. No, I'm not talking like a whiff and it's gone, or a faint smell. I mean like someone is actually cooking, or smoking a cigar, etc. It's currently 2:50 a.m. I'm in my grandmother's home, which she has owned for over 40 years, and I swore someone was brewing coffee to the point where I just got up and went to see if my grandmother was awake. And now it's gone. About 2.5 years ago, I was living alone in an apartment. I was laying in my bed one night. I had my eyes closed and was trying to fall asleep. All of a sudden, I felt hot air on my face. Then again, and again in a rhythmic way like someone was breathing on me. I opened my eyes and sat up. Nothing there, and the breathing stopped. I was freaked out to say the least, but I've had plenty silly, unwarranted fears based on the copious amount of horror movies I've watched when I was younger. So, telling myself it was probably just the HVAC system putting out some hot air for some reason, I laid back down and closed my eyes once more. My breath caught in my throat as I felt hot air blow on my face again. I felt it a few more times, thinking what else could I do but ignore it and try to fall asleep. Suddenly, one of my cats, Dreamer, ran into the room and stopped at the foot of my bed, meowing once if I remember correctly. The breathing stopped. I called her up onto the bed and loved on her until I fell asleep. The next morning, I woke up like normal. It was my day off, so I smoked a bowl and watched a couple of YouTube videos. Finally, I went into my room to change clothes. It was the first time I had taken time to look at any part of my body. I looked down and my left bicep has a circular, almost bite-looking mark on it. Not enough to break the skin, but enough to have left an indent. I wish I had taken a picture because I don't remember perfectly, but I remember it being circular and having nubs or branches coming off in a few spots. By the time afternoon came, it was gone. I thought maybe I had slept on top of a bracelet, but I checked and there was nothing under me as I slept. If anyone has had a similar experience or any insight on what the heck that night was all about, I'd be so grateful. I went to take a nap. In my dream, I was in this mansion, trapped and trying to find a way out. Different sorts of monsters would pop up in hallways and rooms, and I'd have to just run to make it. Eventually, I found a pitch-black, decrepit bedroom that led to the garage and a way out. However, the owner of the palace was somewhere inside, and the most deadly of them all. I cracked the door open and peeked inside. She was right next to the door, with pale skin and long black hair. She slowly turned toward me and crept closer to the door, her hair seeping through the opening like snakes. I decided to fight instead of run, and leaned in closer while yelling her name. "Harrion, Harrion!" A dim light from somewhere inside the room turned on and she vanished. When I looked around, I saw her, but as a doll made out of cloth and yarn. She was laying on the floor with her button eyes staring at me and was dragged around the corner by something. The light flickered off again and I had to go into the room to try and escape the house. Sometimes the light would flicker back on and I would look to see if she was still around. When I made it out, I woke up. I then looked up the name Harrion as it struck me as an odd name. Most of the time in dreams, your brain will reuse assets from your life to get around putting in effort. But I didn't know anyone ever named Harrion, and my go-to names are things like Bob, not Harrion. When I looked it up, one of the things that came up was a Japanese spirit named Harionago or Hariona. She appears as a beautiful woman with long black barbed hair that she can control at will and uses to ensnare her victims and cut them to pieces. It's also said that she walks around Japan smiling at young men. If they smile back, she kills them and brings them back to her palace. If ghosts aren't the spirits of people or demons, what could they be in your opinion? I believe they could either be the small amounts of electricity in your brain getting pulled into the house somehow, or maybe they're invisible interdimensional beings, both of which may explain how they're able to make objects move. I'm not a big believer in anything supernatural or in religions, but for some reason I can't shake the feeling that I'm being watched and followed sometimes, along with a few occurrences from my childhood, where some doors were slammed shut in the middle of the night. One example being when I was at my best friend's house sleeping over, and out of nowhere, a shelf fell off the wall. So we ran upstairs and their bedroom doors slammed behind us, causing a coat hanger to flip off the door and smack the older brother in the head. So we ran to get under the covers. We were about 8 to 10 and 10 to 12 at the time, so we thought it would help out. And instantly, once we got to the beds, their attic door swung open and slammed shut. These houses were about 100 years old at the time, now about 120th. And York City, PA, which had some Civil War involvement, but otherwise was a nice town until the 1990s. For a bit of context, my mother built a new extension to our house months ago, which became the main house, house number 2, while the previous main house, house number 1, became mine. The first signs appeared in house number 1, when the door to my room started opening by itself. This has happened numerous times enough, though I check it every night before going to bed. Then it also started happening to the guest room, which creeped me out, so I always left that room open. Then it began happening in house number 2, which is a 2-story house. The ground floor consists of just the living room and the kitchen, while the second floor consists of my parents' room and then a balcony where we held most of our parties at. While we gather in the living room watching TV of house 2, we just start hearing the door upstairs slamming closed or its doorknob rattling. And if that wasn't enough, the front doors and the kitchen door that leads outside are always found unlocked in the morning. Our housekeeper, who was always the first one up in the morning, was the first to notice. I was bothered by this since I know for a fact that they are always locked as I check those locks whenever I fetch water from the kitchen in the middle of the night. The first time this happened, we immediately suspected burglars. But since the 82-inch Samsung TV was smack dab in the middle of the living room, and the iPad that occasionally forget in the kitchen weren't taken, we quickly disregarded that theory. Well, this kept happening. Our housekeeper quit, and I'm pretty much just curious what will happen next. This happened when I was around 7 or 8 years old. Due to a lack of income to acquire ready-built homes, my family and our neighbours built our own on an abandoned Japanese cemetery. My family lived there for a good 50 years before I came into the picture. Everyone was well aware of the horror stories, i.e. kids running around at night. I usually wake up at around 5:30 or 6 a.m. to get ready for school, while my grandma would wake up around 4 a.m. to do her chores. One morning, I woke up around 4:30 to an animal wandering around my room. I took a closer look and realised it was a monkey. As a kid, I thought, cool, my grandma got us a monkey. So, I decided to head out of my bedroom to look for my grandma. Right outside of my room is the living room. There, I saw my aunt sipping on a cup of coffee. But it was strange because she would never bring home coffee glass from our nearby coffee shop. She would tell them to pack it in a plastic bag instead. What was even more strange was that there was a woman laying down right next to her. I didn't know who she was. She was laying face down on the seat of the chair, knees on the floor. I was curious, so I took a seat next to my aunt and asked her who that was. Just as I finished asking my question, she stood up and told me she had to go wash her glass. As she was heading towards the kitchen, she disappeared halfway. The woman laying down turned her body against me and faced me. She was pale and had no facial features but a nose. I ran for the kitchen where my grandma was. I screamed, "Grandma, there's a ghost inside our home," as I pointed towards the woman. My grandma didn't see anyone or anything. Then I saw another male, pale, pasteless figure putting on my hairband jewellery on the woman. I passed out of shock. Only recently, my grandma told me that she had seen these figures around our home for a long time. She said these figures appear because they want us to give them something. In my culture, we burn stuff to send things to the underworld. This happened to me years ago while camping with my family and a few friends I'd invited. Camping isn't much fun once it gets dark, so me and my friends, being at that every idea sounds like a good idea phase of life, decided it would be fun to take a walk. Not anywhere dangerous like up a mountain or through the forest, but along the small shores surrounding the lake we'd chosen as our weekend retreat. We walked about a mile, and when our boredom hadn't been satisfied, we built a fire and decided to tell ghost stories. You know, the usual campfire tales. After we'd finished up and dismantled our homemade fire pit, I found a small stone towards the centre of the pit that we'd scorched with our fire. I pocketed it, thinking it would be a nice souvenir, and I loved the spiral patterns and waves the fire had left on it. When we returned home a few days later, I kept the stone on my dresser with a couple of other knickknacks. Later that week, my friend asked me to stay the night with her, so I went and spent the night like I'd done a million times before, thinking nothing of it. When I got home the next day, my parents told me that my dog had died. It wasn't a natural death, and they said we were going to spend the next couple of weeks in a hotel or at a friend's. It turned out that someone had broken into my room and had stabbed my dog. Everyone was so thankful I had been at a friend's house, since the intruder was most likely after me. My mother had already packed a bag for me, so I didn't have to see the remains in my room, and she told me she grabbed the books I was reading, along with some other trinkets and photos I'd placed on my dresser. Later, as we were getting dinner at the hotel's restaurant, my father suffered a heart attack. The paramedics told us his medication had been switched with another prescription that, if you already had heart problems, could kill you. Since my father is a very private man, especially when it comes to his health, the police told us to lay low, as this information could mean it's someone we know, someone who is close to us. I tried to think of any friends or anyone close to only me would know his medications, but no one came to mind. That night, my mum, brother, and I told our friends and family that we were leaving town while this blew over. We switched hotels the next day and didn't tell anyone where my dad was being held. Still, as we made our way across town, my younger brother was hit by a car. I didn't see it happen, and when I turned to see my mother clutching him in the middle of the street, sobbing, I knew something weird had to be going on. No one could have possibly known where we were, and they couldn't have been close enough to push him. He's now in the hospital with my father, and the police have decided to question my mother and me, as we were the only bystanders close enough to see what had happened. She pushed him. I don't know why, but she just... My mom stuttered out. What? I did not. I didn't even see it happen. Why are you telling them this? Unless you... You're a monster. You probably switched your father's medication and killed that poor, sweet dog. I wasn't even near the street and I wasn't home when my dog died or when Dad's med was switched. I wouldn't even know what medication to switch it with. You did this. In the end, they ruled out my mother's protests as hysteria for being placed in such a rough situation. It would be hard to have two of your closest family members fighting for their lives. And apparently the stress did get to my mother. I found her in the hotel bathroom at around 4 in the morning with her wrists slit and sorry written on the wall. She'd been that way for hours and there was nothing I could have done. As I went to tell my father and brother the news, whether they were awake or not, I felt the familiar flat shape in my pocket that had been a comforting reminder this entire time. I don't remember taking the stone out of my bag and putting it there, but it has been a lifesaver. A perfect worry stone to rub while you're killing your dog, switching your father's medication, pushing your brother into oncoming traffic, and convincing your mother that all these events are her fault and that she should just end it all. I'd never had these urges until last week, but now they're insatiable. Hi, I'd like to start this off by saying that my name is James Smith and I'm 26 years old. I live in a small town in Illinois named Clinton. I've lived here most of my life. I had moved into this town when I was 6, right after my dad had passed away from cancer, and my mom lost pretty much everything after that. So she wanted to start fresh here because we have family that lives here in this town. So she took up on the offer of help and a roof to go over our heads. It was hard for me, at first, to move to a new town and school, while still being upset and depressed that my dad had just passed. I got used to it though, made new friends, even got married and had 2 kids. But there's something off about this town. There is a rule that everyone is made to follow. This is why I'm writing this right now. Our family broke that rule. If you hear the sound of ringing outside between the times of 1:30 to 3:30 in the morning, do not look out the window, no matter what. I had never known what they meant by this or why we had to follow it. Every time I would ask my mom, pure dread flushed through her face and she would scream at me. Just follow the rules, sweetie, so you can keep you and mommy safe, okay? So I listened and followed it without much thought at all. Up until last night. This is where the story begins. It was a cold winter night here in Illinois, like usual. It was right for the period of time of year, which being an October night, I was getting ready for bed, putting my 2 younger boys to bed. I walked out of the room, quietly closing the door, and turned off the hallway light. I made my way down the hall and into the kitchen, where my wife was sitting and smoking a dimly lit cigarette. "Hey, sweetie, did you put the kids to bed?" she said with a smile as she proceeded to take another drag. "Yeah, I put them to sleep," I said in an exhausted tone. The room went quiet for a second. The only sound that could be heard was the ceiling fan that was on high above us. My wife looked down at her ring and sighed. "How much longer, James? How much longer until we can get out of this damn town?" I walked over to the cabinet and opened it, grabbed out a bottle of Jack Daniels and proceeded to pour myself a glass and sat on the other side of the kitchen table. "I don't know, honey. I'm freaked out about the disappearance too, you know. I want our kids to be able to live safely and comfortably too," I said in an irritated tone. "And this damn rule is making it so much more difficult. That's why we put earplugs in their ears while they're sleeping," I screamed. I picked up my glass and finished it in one go. I got up and walked to the kitchen, looking out into the darkness and thinking about what we should do. "Let's move to Springfield. It's a lot safer there," my wife stated in a desperate tone. "All right, I'll start looking at places in the morning," I said with a fake smile on my face. We both started walking towards our bedroom. We both got ready for bed and laid down and went to sleep for the night. I woke up to the sound of my alarm buzzing. I sat up and looked around. My wife was still sleeping, so I got out of bed and went to go check on the kids. They were still sleeping as well. I closed their door and walked into the kitchen. I got out our old, dusty laptop and went onto the web to try and find us a new home in Springfield, pretty much anywhere at this point. I marked down the ones I liked the most and looked a little more and then shut the laptop and put it back on the table in the living room. I had work in an hour, so I got ready and ate some cereal and made my way to work. While driving, I heard on the radio there had been another disappearance in our town. A 10-year-old boy had gone missing in the middle of the night, and if you had any information, please call the local police department. God, another one. We need to get the hell out of this town, I said in a panicked voice. I work at the old warehouse on the edge of town. I didn't have much of a special job, just doing the normal stuff like using a forklift and moving around crates and packages all day. But the pay was good, so I'd stuck with this job for years now. I pulled up and got out of my car and walked in. My day was uneventful. I just did the normal routine that I'd done 1,000 times over. It was 6 p.m. now. I put my work clothes into my locker and started heading to my car. I drove home and walked into the house. My wife came and greeted me at the door with a smile on her face. "How was work, babe?" she asked in a joyful tone. "It was good. Did you hear there was another disappearance in town?" I said. The room went quiet, and we both had a moment of silence and walked to the kitchen. "I'm going to call the housing unit in the morning and schedule a meeting," I said in a serious tone. We went to bed that night, and in the morning, I woke up. I shut off the alarm and went to head out into the kitchen to make myself a cup of coffee. I got the laptop out and picked the house we were going to move to. I called them and we talked over details, and all I had to do was go and fill out the paperwork now. I got dressed and rushed out the door. I arrived at the place a couple hours later. I was greeted by a really nice woman. She had long black hair, was around 5'5", and was in a pretty blue dress. "Hi, you're James, correct?" she said in a cheerful manner. "Ah, yes, it's nice to meet you," I said. "Here, come with me. I'll give you a tour of the place before we sign the papers over to you," she said. We walked into the house and began to look around. It's nice, I thought to myself. While we were walking around, I started thinking about all the good memories we can make in this house. I smiled for real, for the first time in a while. We got done with the tour and I signed the papers. She handed me the house keys and we shook hands. She got in her car and drove off. I sat on the porch for what seemed like hours. Oh crap, it's starting to get dark, I said to myself. I got up and got into my car and started to make my way back home. Like before, it took me around a couple hours to get back home. As I was pulling up, the clock read 10:30. Something didn't seem right though. All the lights were off in the house. Normally, my wife would be up, waiting for me in the kitchen with the light on. I quickly got out of my car and ran up to the door. "It's unlocked," I said in a frightened tone. I definitely locked it before I had left. I laughed at myself. Maybe Mia had to go out and run errands while I was gone. I walked into the door and it was pitch black. I looked around and started to call for my wife and kids. No response. I started to get scared, and then I flipped on the lights and my heart sank through my chest. My wife was laying on the floor in a puddle of blood. I screamed her name and ran over to her. I checked her pulse and I started to cry. She was dead. I got up and ran into my kids' room, and they were nowhere to be found. The window had been smashed, and it appears like there was a struggle of some sort. "How could this be happening? We were so close," I said while screaming and crying, when from behind me, I heard large footsteps and the sound of ringing coming from whatever was behind me. It's only 10 p.m. The ringing isn't supposed to be here yet, I thought as I sat there frozen in fear. A loud voice boomed from behind me. "Your son broke the rule. Now you will all be punished." I turned around in anger and saw something that would haunt me for the rest of my life. A tall, slender and deformed creature was standing behind me. It had long talon-like fingers and razor-sharp teeth, and it was huge. It must have been around 8'4". It was holding my youngest boy by the throat. My boy was lifeless and had an expression of fear on his face. "What the fuck did you do to my family?" I screamed at the creature. Like I said before they broke the rule, I changed the time by a little, hope you don't mind. It smiled out of joy and I blacked out at that moment. I woke up lying on the floor face first. Took a second to collect myself. I quickly snapped back into reality and sat up. "Maya, boys," I called out, but then remembering the night before. I stood up and dialed 911. When they arrived, they took my statement and a missing person report was put in place. After they left, I drove back to the house where we were once going to live in and sat on the porch and started to cry. Then I heard my youngest boy call out from the woods, "Daddy, help me!" I shot up and bolted towards the sound of his voice, calling out his name. No response. My brain must be playing tricks on me, I thought to myself. I fell to the ground and gave up. A year has passed and I'm currently living in the new house. I couldn't handle going back to that other house. Every time I did, that night kept replaying in my head and it drove me crazy. I can't get over the fact that if I would have been there for them, they wouldn't be dead. At night, I always have the same dream, walking into that damned house and trying to save them, but I can't. It almost feels like that thing I had seen that night doesn't want me to forget and move on, like I'm in its sick little game. At night, I can hear what I can only imagine is him, walking back and forth, and that damn ringing doesn't stop. It never does. I've been tempted just to look out the window, but I just can't bring myself to do it. That's what he would want. He wants me to look out just to show me a sickening scene of my family. I know I don't have much time left. I just can't take it anymore. So, I'm writing this now to warn you. If you ever move into Clinton, Illinois, never break the one rule. You'll regret it for the rest of your life.